Welcome everybody to this DMTV episode, and especially welcome to our panelists this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the EU major member states recovery plans, and in fact, looking at them through critical lenses, and this is why the title is Grey New Deal rather than Green New Deal. I'm particularly happy to be opening up this episode today because in the framework of the Green New Deal for Europe campaign, we have just been recently appointing a new Green New Deal coordinator, which is Dusan Pavlovic, who will shortly introduce to us, where we are with the campaign and where we are aiming at. I will shortly introduce all the guests to you. We know that in the framework of the next generation EU, the European member states are drafting and finalizing the relevant national plans, and there is a lot of expectations but also concerns about them. It's very important. We know that the fundamental issues to be tackling unemployment and the economy shortcomings that have been happening all throughout, and we also know that somehow it's very important that there is a synergistic coordination among member states, elevating the ambition concerning social and environmental issues. Now, before giving the floor to Dusan Pavlovic, I will just go through the guests, introducing them to you. First, we're going to be having the Corporate Europe Observatory. Pasquale Sabido couldn't be here with us because he was just caught up by an unexpected event, but we have a video from him. Then we have Federico Carli, honing into the national cases. Federico Carli is an international renowned economist, and we were lucky enough to be meeting in Brazil quite long ago. More than 10 years ago, in fact, during my posting there. And then Lorenzo Fioramonti, former Minister of Education, and very recently has set up a green team called Facciamo Eco within the Parliament in collaboration with the Greens. And from Spain, Nicola Scherer from the Debt Observatory in Globalization. From France, Benoit Bourri, independent researcher and author. I could just come across this very interesting website called economy.org. And then we have Dominika Bigon from the German Trade Union Confederation. And last but not least, Felix Heimann from E3G, which is quite an interesting climate change think tank. It's very close to my heart. In fact, I've worked with them substantially in the past. So before starting that interesting debate, I would just give the floor to our Green New Deal for Europe coordinator, Dusan Pavlovic.
Thank you very much, Stefania, and thank you all for coming, and thank you all the panelists that are here. As you said before, European Green Deal or European recovery funds are rather gray than green, and they are also on the gray side of the justice. What it means? Well, they are trying to take the burden of the oligarchs, bankers, and big corporations. The problem is that there is no burden on them, not now, not anytime. The burden is all the time on the backs of the working class. Previously mentioned EU initiatives prove that public works and pouring money are possible. The pouring money, they are just pouring it into the wrong hands. This is where DiEM25 and Green New Deal for Europe come into place. Our Green New Deal is trying to empower people and give them the changes they long for. The solution is fairly simple and easy. We have the concrete numbers and concrete actions with proposals. We demand decent green jobs, universal basic dividend, public housing, and Europe for the many and not for the few. In the future, we will try to get out of academic circles a bit, something that the left is usually closed in, and we will try to address the frustrations of the so-called quote-unquote common people, because they are frustrated for a reason. Now we have the solution in our blueprint for Europe's just transition, And European Union with this Grey Deal actually proved that something like that is really, really possible. If you want to know more about the Green New Deal for Europe campaign, please go check out our social networks, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at GND for Europe. There's currently tweetstorm action going on, directed towards the European Parliament especially. So it would be nice to have you engaged. This is something we need, and this is something that is out of the debating. This is something urgent, and we need to work towards it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Dusan. It's quite important that somehow, we are just bringing up new and fresh commitment and passion and enthusiasm for the campaign. Thank you a lot. John from the Management Control, whatever, can I ask you to bring in the video from Pascoe Sabido? The story goes that Pascoe was just caught up in another meeting. Therefore, we have a video from him. We managed to have an interview with him. In fact, we had an exchange of questions that I would love to share with you. And it's quite interesting, in fact, because it's quite an overview about where we are concerning the European Green Deal. And in fact, I came across a very interesting article from the Corporate Europe Observatory, which is in fact entitled Grey New Deal. And Pascoe is going to be explaining us why it's that the European deal is rather grey and not green. So, hello, Pascoe Sabido. Very happy to be with you today. You are from the Corporate Europe Observatory, which is a research team exposing the privileged access of corporation through their lobby groups within the EU making policies. Now, I'm particularly glad that I can raise targeted questions to you, because as you know, we're just setting up the webinar called Grey New Deal. And I was really going through all the fabulous work that you have been doing, concerning the European Green Deal and, the real story behind it somehow, because it's a rosy story, the one they sell out, right? Yet there is a lot of rhetorics, and we know that it's about carbon trading, for which somehow big polluters continuing polluting, slowing the green transition, and it's about emission reduction targets which are too slow and too low, and it's about the public money which are still flowing into the industry, so false solutions. So somehow, and crucially, that the European Green Deal is not phasing out fossil fuels, right? So somehow it really falls short of what is needed. Now, can you just tell us more about these points that I brought up, and provocatively, could there be a way out of this rhetoric, of this paradigm, of the status quo?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. John, if you'd like to just pop up the presentation. I provide something a little bit just based on, because we've actually done research into this, so I thought I should just present some of it. So yeah, I guess we, as you've already explained, CEO, we did a report last July into lobbying around the European Green Deal. It's presented as transformative, amazing sort of program by the European Commission. And you can see this is the cover of the report. And van der Leyen, the Commission President, even called this Europe's man on the moon moment. This is a video we did. I can post the link later. And many NGOs and progressive voices thought this really represented a turning point. But actually, what we've seen is a year after its launch, the European Green Deal has been hijacked by those corporate interests, unfortunately. So I mean, it's worth just digging down. It covers not just climate and energy policy, but transport, buildings, agriculture, biodiversity, industrial policy, finance, like loads is contained in it. It's huge. So this means a whole raft of new revisions and regulations are coming through the EU at the moment. But its fingerprints all over it are from industry and from the fossil fuel industry in particular. So it's a real shame. You asked a good question. Does it phase out fossil fuels, leaving them around? No, and as you said, no, it definitely doesn't. Does it promise new amounts of money? No, it's going to reshuffle existing money and it's going to leverage it to get sort of private sector investment. The same thing we've been hearing for decades. I guess the only new money, in fact, is from recovery funds. And even some of that is quite a lot of loans. But the main failure of the European Green Deal is a failure to transform our economic system. And that's really the cause of climate change. Colonial capitalism is worth naming it, because the European Green Deal, in fact, is business as usual for big polluters, particularly the fossil fuel industry. So if we just pull up the slides here, this is taken from our report. I mean, you can see it's full of false solutions that lock us into more fossil fuels, from market-based mechanisms like carbon trading and offsetting to meet net zero, to technological fixes like carbon capture and storage and hydrogen. And it's based on the same extractivist colonial policies that we've seen before. So neighboring countries to the EU are merely seen as sources of raw materials under the Green New Deal, just as they have been up to now to provide us with fossil fuels. And ultimately, it's the same neoliberal rules that underpin the single market that are at play in the European Green Deal. So it's not introducing effective and binding regulations on the biggest polluters, in part because the biggest polluters have lobbied to stop it. And maybe I'll just, I went to an event earlier this week online, of course. I'm going to show you a little slide from it. And the keynote speaker was the director of DG Energy. So this is the Ministry for Energy. And she said that the European Green Deal is a growth strategy for a fair and prosperous society. So fair and prosperous means, a concentration of wealth and economic power in the hands of the incumbents. There may be, but this is sort of what they see. They see this economic growth leading to fairness. So why is the European Green Deal so grey? And why are the fingerprints of industry all over it? If you just pull up the next slide. Well, one of the reasons is that industry's resources to pour into lobbying efforts are enormous. I mean, they're able to hire an army of lobbyists and consultants and law firms to work for them. They have huge numbers of well-funded trade associations that can agree positions, not just within an industry, but across industries, which allows a concerted and coordinated lobbying campaign. They've also got the ability to track what goes on in every file. As I said, this is a huge, huge piece of legislation with so many parts to it. And so not only do they track it, they know when to intervene, produce the right position papers. They know who's responsible in the Commission, the Parliament, the Council. They're able to work out specific strategies for each individual, each country. I mean, it goes into such granular detail. It's very impressive. And then they use this to sort of bombard decision makers with letters, emails, invitations to meetings. And this is the top officials, but also heads of unit and those drafting policies, I guess a bit lower down that pecking order. And it buys you a huge PR campaign. I mean, that money buys you great publicity, media campaigns. Sponsoring the newspapers in Brussels also helps, as we see a lot of that. And it buys you a lot of public events, organizing flashy public events with decision makers. Basically gets you everywhere, because the goal is to fill the whole of what we call the Brussels bubble with industry's message. And we've seen, so the European Green Deal is the most lobbied on topic in Brussels. And I mean, it's the economy, stupid. That's really clear. So as this slide shows, so I didn't really talk about it, in the first 100 days of the European Green Deal, business interests had 151 meetings with the top Climate and Energy Commission staff, including their cabinets. That's like on average 11 a week. And from civil society, it was 29 meetings during that period. So 70% is industry. And this was only the top level officials, not others. So we also see the fossil fuel industry had on average 2 meetings a week, which just shows, it's being really in there. But there is another reason. I'm going to try and move. I'm going to quickly go over this bit. I think it's worth stating. There is another reason. In the EU, it needs expertise and input. It has a very small staff, considering the size of the task. So it's not just lobbying from industry that sort of pushes itself in there. There's a pull from the EU that pulls these industry players towards it, which is one of the reasons we end up with such industry influence. Combine that with ideological alignment, and this goes back to the creation of the single market and the overriding ideology that rules across the bloc, and let's be honest, globally. If we look at the US, Japan, you look at sort of global capitalism, this is the overriding ideology. And a combination of all of this means that industry enjoys privileged access to decision makers, and it sets the agenda. So for the European Green Deal, yeah, it's been really successful. And the way to tell that, we've got this slide on, is the fossil fuel industry happy? Yes, it is happy. This is from Shell, from its trade associations, Fuels Europe, from the gas industry, from others. Yeah. They're all really supportive of the European Green Deal. I'm not going to go into specific points on sort of the policy points, but you asked me also, is there a way out of this sort of, I guess, profit-driven paradigm? Yeah, is there a way out? Yeah, of course there is. But there's a few things this needs. It needs to move away from seeing climate change as a technological problem, one about concentrations of CO2, and move towards seeing it as a political and economic problem. But it means, as I said at the beginning, tackling climate change is about tackling the systems that underpin it. That means tackling capitalism. And that's not going to be led by the European Commission, quite clearly, because the problem is far deeper than the European Green Deal. But it is a huge potential battle site. There's so many contradictions brought up by the European Green Deal. How are we able to push these to the fore and to really act on them? But that means being brave. And it really does mean brave, not being practical, not just going along with what's been decided and saying, this is the space we have to act in. Here are some market mechanisms. Okay, we'll try and improve them. We need to actually demand real change. And one of the key ways we've been doing this is through attacking the fossil fuel industry. So we've been trying to target the fossil fuel industry and cut its access, to literally cut it out of our political system. So in 2019, I'll just show you, we had launched a campaign called Fossil Free Politics. And many of the speakers on this call are actually members, because it's a national level as well as the EU level. And it's based on what happened to the tobacco industry. So the tobacco industry has literally been cut out of the political system, and it still finds ways to get in. But at the UN level and the World Health Organization, they realized they can't have the ambition they need with the tobacco industry so influential. So it created a firewall between the tobacco lobbyists on the one hand and public health officials on the other. And this was to protect public policy making. And so we're trying to do the same thing. So we have 4 demands around instituting a firewall, which means no meetings, stopping vested interests, so the conflicts of interest we see throughout our political system, ending preferential treatment, this can mean subsidies as well as places on sort of government trade missions, and rejecting partnerships. So this means not sharing platforms. Our decision makers are not sharing platforms with the fossil fuel industry, not being sponsored by them, not attending their events and not having them have events on their own premises. But this is not just about new rules, it's about a cultural shift. Sort of an acceptance that those causing the problem should not be part of shaping the solution. And the fossil fuel industry, of course, is key because it's so central to our economy, so central to tackling climate change. But it's an important place to begin, but we shouldn't stop there. This has to be taken beyond the fossil fuel industry to the wider economy. Should those being regulated be in charge of regulations, be it car companies or the chemicals industry? So we need to have a shift that stops conflating industry interests with public interests and all that entails. And there is energy behind it. I mean, we've seen the huge climate strikes. We've seen people demanding change. Can we channel this into something effective? And we think targeting the fossil fuel industry and cutting them out of our political system is a great place to start.
So it's about shifting the paradigm. It's about being brave, and it's about making coalitions, right? Like somehow joining forces, and that's why. And that's why we're very happy to have you with us. And thank you for, carving out some of your precious time and very busy agenda for us. And we look forward for future collaboration because I can see we are on the same page.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, be in touch. And I mean, please do share the links to our reports, to the videos. And if anyone would like to know more about the campaign, get in touch. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Get in touch. European Green Deal is business as usual, and it was just explaining why we should be, joining forces and mobilizing actions in coalitions in order to be reorienting the course ahead and forward. I don't know whether we are able to be resuming the video or we will continue with the national cases. I would rather continue with the national cases. So the first question, I would just and move on to Ite. Federico Carli. president of Associazione Guido Carli. Well, despite declarations that we are in the age of sustainability, somehow economic development and environmental sustainability have always been branded as incompatible, although we know that the links between environment and economics are quite manifold, and somehow economists can't stay and can't live without the environment. So my question to you is, do you think that somehow finally we can come up with a new paradigm, with a new economic paradigm, which is in harmony with the environment? And when we talk about the Italian national plan, right now there has been quite a breakthrough change, because the newly appointed Prime Minister Draghi has been recruiting a consultancy company, Mckinsey, to be going through the plan itself. So a lot of changes have been occurring for the better, in fact. And so my question to you is that 207 billion euro that are going to be flowing into Italy, within the framework of the Next Generation EU. How do you think the government will be spending them, and are they really going to be tackling the core issues and address the problems that you are just experiencing? The floor is yours, Federico.
Thank you very much, Stefania. Good afternoon, everybody. So we do live in turbulent times and difficult ones. Over the last 12 years, economic-wise, we experienced in Italy 3 devastating recessions. 2008, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2019, 2020. This is something unprecedented after World War II, and something that caused many problems: social problems, political problems, economic problems, environmental problems. Your question and the topic, then, it's absolutely important, I would say vital. Now, since I have a few minutes to make the long story short, I'll start from the 18th century, from the first industrial revolution, and then I come to our times. So capitalism is the most powerful engine for growth and productivity. Since the first industrial revolution, we experienced as a world, our globe, planet Earth, incredible growth of wealth, improvement in life expectancy. The quality of our lives improved dramatically. However, capitalism has 3 main and most important fragilities. First, it is very unstable. It's an unstable system. So financial crisis, unemployment, inflation, monetary crisis, it's unstable. Second, it does generate inequalities. Third, it puts incredible pressure on our environment. This is why decision-making and policy-making is crucial in order to keep together the positive thing about the system, which is this incredible engine for growing, for making our economy grow, and for making our productivity grow through innovation. And temperating these fragilities, these problems. Now, why I am saying this? Because we have in Italy, we have to keep together the opportunity for relaunching our economy with the need of making it environmentally sustainable. This is the challenge that we have. So we cannot say we have to choose environment or we have to choose the production of wealth. We have to put these two things together. Now, let me just give you some figures very quickly. Over the last 20 years, the productivity in Italy grew just 0.5% per year, which is nothing. So we have a problem because the engine is not expressing its potential. Second, the inequalities are growing in Italy over the last years. The Gini index is deteriorating year after year. Third, unemployment is extremely high in Italy, particularly in some regions. Fourth, our income per capita is the same as 20 years ago. This is something that never happened after World War II. And our income per capita is now 15% below the Eurozone average. We had these three incredible and devastating recession, so we have to sustain our economy. Now, how can we sustain our economy and do something positive for our environment, for the sustainability of our development? I think that the crucial point are investment. And this is something that we overlooked over the last years because in 2009, the public investment in Italy were 54 billion euro, 3.4% of our GDP. Today, 37 billion euro, just 2.1% of our GDP. So we cut the public investment. And I think that this is the key point because in order to make our development sustainable, we can either act on the demand, the consumption, the way we do consume, either act on the supply side. We are talking on about the supply side because the Recovery Fund does regard the way we spend money, the way we should invest. So basically, I think that our challenge is first to put these funds, these resources in investment more than subsidies or bonuses or incentives. Investment. Second, what kind of investment? Investment in new technologies that will be sustainable. Investment in our land, in our territory. We have a fragile land and we need to make it safer. So I think that this is the real challenge. So I'm not focusing that much in the amount of resources that we have, in the quantity, but rather than the quality. It's important the way we use these resources. So I would suggest our government to focus on investment and investment that are promoting the productiveness of our system and the sustainability of our development. This is the key point, And in the next 2 months, we will see the plan. And then in the next 12, 24 months, we will see the way we spend this money. This is really a crucial challenge for us. Otherwise, I think that we will have dramatic and very difficult social and political problems in the years to come.
Well, thank you so much, Federico. So we really need a change system somehow, and a new paradigm, as you were saying, and that your talk somehow takes me to the other question that I would be raising to Lorenzo Fioramonti. Lorenzo, thank you so much to be here with us today. Do you think that the current, which is in fact under revision, recovery plan, the Italian one, will be able to go beyond the status quo? And if not, what would be the alternative? And then I have like the $1 million question for you. If you were Mario Draghi, how would you act? How would you tackle the current situation? Please, Lorenzo.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to this talk. And thank you, Stefania, for the question. So to the first part of your question, you were saying whether I am confident that the next generation Italy plan will succeed. I would say that I'm hopeful, but I'm not particularly confident from what I've seen so far. Just to give you a couple of ideas, and then I'm going to talk about the second part. What would I do if I were in government? First of all, we are late. This is super important. You know, like this type of intervention has to be timely. And unfortunately, I think Europe is late, but Italy is late within the European Union. We haven't yet seen the final draft. It's just a month ago because we're supposed to submit it by the end of April. We know that the initial drafts were extremely vague, scattered. Initially, the government had compiled a long list of projects without any significant coherence, internal coherence. This is what happens often, you know, like when you ask someone to give you an idea, they don't come up with new ideas. They give you the ideas that they had already prepared years earlier. And those ideas were not cut out for the current emergency. So this is the first part. So there's a problem with timing. There's a second part which has got to do with vision. In this regard, I have to say that we have to thank the fact that at least the European Union has come up with some standards. Because if it weren't for the overall framework that says, for instance, that 37% of all funding has to go towards transformative, environmentally friendly projects, I don't think the Italian government would have come up with that, would have done pretty much business as usual. So at least, you know, this is putting a pressure on the government to come up with something which is different from the past. What is still missing is an important taxonomy, right? We do need to know what is sustainable. What do we mean by sustainability? And this is true across Europe. And I think I'm very much in favor of, in agreement with what has been said earlier by the delegate from Corporate Europe Observatory, when he was talking about the amount of greenwashing that is everywhere these days. In the past, I think many of us that come from the environmental movements, that come from environmental science, that have been doing this for many years, initially we had to confront the opposition of those who denied that climate change was real, then those who denied that climate change was caused by man. And now the problem is not those who deny that there's an environmental problem. The problem is that now everyone has become an environmentalist, and they all selling ideas that are not at all in line with the ecological transformation that is needed. They're selling it as if they were, you know, fundamentally different, disruptive of business as usual. And this is not only true in the corporate world, but it's also true in the political system. So now from the UK all the way to Eastern Europe, you find in parties that have never been environmentally friendly, have never been concerned with the environment. Now all of them are reinventing themselves as true environmentalists. And often coming up with ideas that have got nothing to do with the environmental transformation that we really need. Carbon capture and storage, for instance, it's become pretty fashionable these days, and it could have been okay 20, 30 years ago. Now we do need to go well beyond putting the trash under the carpet. The same can be said about the hydrogen conversation, fossil gas and natural gas and so on and so forth. So the risk that we're facing in Europe, and also particularly in Italy, is that not only are we late, but we're going to come up with projects that are supposed to be green and they're not green at all. And this is, so I call it the opposition between a true transition and a transaction. And it's somehow the transaction is taking over the transition. So that's the second very, very crucial step. The third one is that it's not a new deal. Okay, you highlighted something so crucial. The European deal is called the Green Deal, but it's not called the Green New Deal. And that has permeated also the Next Generation EU and the national recovery plans. By the way, across Europe, mostly it's the recovery part that is highlighted by the media, never the resilience part. Remember that the two keywords are recovery and resilience, but we have forgotten the resilience, and we're talking about recovery. Recovering without resilience is not recovering, okay? And here I'm closing because I see my time is almost up. So what is the final part? To be a new deal, it needs to be not only an investment plan, but it needs to be an economic transformation plan, which also includes a fiscal transformation. When FDR in the 1930s came up with the idea of a new deal, it wasn't just about giving people money, but it was also about reforming the tax system. And if we don't do that, the tax incentives will still go in the opposite direction. Let me give you an example. Italy will get, if it's successful, everything goes well, and we don't make mistakes, which is to be seen, our country will get to almost a bit less than 200 billion euros over 6 years. Our national GDP is annually 1.7 thousand billions, okay? 1,700 billions. So unless we change the color of that national GDP, which is by orders of magnitude bigger than all the investment plans coming from the European Union, we're never going to be able to change the trajectory of our nation, right? I mean, if I have 200 million euros, a small part of which going towards environmentally friendly projects, provided that they're really truly environmental, but my national fiscal system, my national production system, the industries keep doing what they were doing before, by a GDP which is 7 or 8 times bigger than that, then we're never going to make a difference. And that GDP is annual GDP, okay? That is over, the Next Generation EU is over 6 years. So we're never going to make a difference. That's why I think if the European Union, and I'm closing, is really, really keen on pursuing a transformation, needs to say that the Stability and Growth Pact has to be replaced as well by something that I dare call the Sustainability and Well-being Pact, so that all the economic rules of the European Union will be finally aligned with the principles of the Next Generation EU. Otherwise, it's going to be a smoke screen. It's going to be cosmetic change and not truly transformative change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. Very powerful and passionate your talk. I like so much the sustainability and well-being pact. This is where we should be heading to. Thank you a lot. Now, keeping in that Mediterranean area, I will move on to Spain with Nicola Scherer, and you have the España Puede, right? So I just have a question for you, Nicola. Before COVID-19, somehow the government was going through a number of social reforms. Now, does the current recovery plan reflect this, process? And is it ambitious? And what are the long-term risks? What are the processes? And then what are the structural difficulties that you might be, bumping into? Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everybody who is listening to us in the YouTube channel. So in responding to your questions, I would first give a short overview on the situation in Spain regarding the drafting of the national recovery plans. As you may know, the President Pedro Sanchez presented the draft for the Recovery and Resilience Facility to the European Commission on the 7th of October of last year. So Estefania called España Puede. And the government will ask for around 140,000 million of euro for funds. So a few thoughts on the process in Spain. In Spain, we also had turbulent times. So we had almost 6 months of busy project formulations. There are 3 channels basically to present proposals to the government. The first is the regional governments could submit projects to the financed by the national plan until the 31st of January. Second, we had the ministries launching public announcement for specific sectors, so rural development, energy transition, etc. And they are still gathering information on possible projects to be financed. And then third, the Spanish government has kept the door open for a third way of presenting projects through informal meetings. That means that consultancies and big corporations could directly present the project to the ministries. So what kind of recovery plan or what kind of projects have been presented yet? I think this is really interesting, because then we will see to where the definite plan will point out. So we can pretty much foresee where the public recovery money goes to by analyzing those hundreds and hundreds of projects which have been submitted to the Spanish government in the next month. And here I would like to link to the message of Pasque. The money will be used basically to modernize Spanish industry and will not change the actual economic model, which is the root cause for climate emergency now. And I have 3 examples for you to show this. First, the main budget from the project is foreseen for promoting the hydrogen project. It's presented as the green solution for energy transition. And we and many experts say it's not, it's a false solution. No, the model of production and the consumption will not be changed. And here we have the money basically going into the pockets of the big fossil companies. For example, the transnational corporation Celsa, Suez, and Naturgy are involved in the Catalonian hydrogen project, and Petronor, Repsol, and Enagás are involved in the huge Basque hydrogen project. Then secondly, the traditional automotive industry will be modernized. This is a huge amount of money going to, and they will turn it into electric motive industry. And here the regions will focus especially on production of batteries. And the third example is that big corporations have individually presented the projects through these informal ways for a total amount of more than 100,000 millions of euros, only for the modernization of their own corporate structure. So Endesa, for example, has presented 110 initiatives for 19,000 millions of euros. Iberdrola, 150 initiatives for 21 million. So only 2 companies together are reclaiming almost 30% of the overall budget allocated to Spain. And we could resume the process basically here in Spain, and the outcomes of the last month of this drawing of the recovery plan it have been mainly the big corporations who have presented projects due to privileged access to information, privileged contacts, and also due to their economic capacity to contract consultancies to formulate the project. In general, there was a lack of transparency in all the processes. Citizens mostly got informed basically through the press once the project was already submitted. And there was no real participation of civil society and also actors from the social economy, for example, small and medium enterprises or freelancers were totally left out of the processes and will probably not be the beneficiaries of the public recovery fund. And then now regarding to the impacts, and then I'm going to close the intervention, regarding the impact on national policies and laws, Stefania, what you ask about, I would like to highlight one central process, which is going right on now in Spain. On the 15th of November last year, the Spanish Confederation of Business Organization, CEOE, sent a proposal on reforming the Spanish public procurency laws to the Spanish government. And they had elaborated, well, the proposal together with the lawyers or the leading consultancies. For example, PricewaterhouseCoopers was involved. And 6 weeks later, in December, the government published almost the same document as a royal decree law, reducing deadlines and even more seriously proposing that Next Generation EU projects should be excluded from the obligation to conduct environmental impact assessments. So all looks like that the argument of urgency and the need to speed up administration processes in order to capture the European funds are given more importance than the criteria of sustainability and the compliance of the do no harm principle. So what does the recovery plan reflect? Concluding now my intervention. No? I think the Next Generation EU is funding the kind of model, of course, well, you know, it's funding the model of transition laid down in the European Green Deal. But it seems that the lessons from the pandemic have not been learned and they have not been included in the structure and content of the recovery funds. Just remember that it was the public system, not the private companies, who responded to the people's needs in the moment of crisis. However, the public part does not receive the funds. It goes to the part of the economy who less help to overcome the crisis. And we have experienced the importance of the basic and social work, like doctors, nurses, bus drivers, cleaning workers, etc., and the importance of care work, realized mainly by women now, to maintain the economic system. So here I'm disagreeing maybe with Federico, who said that public investment is the crucial point for the future. I think the crucial point is creating resilient economic and social models. This is also what Lorenzo just pointed out now. And this means changing, for me, the way of thinking and organizing our economy. We have to question that investment involvement. No, investment requires finally a financial return. But they are vital sectors for our society and for our economy who sustain life and who will never give you a financial return. No? And I think those sectors should be the first being addressed in the recovery plans. And with this, thank you very much for listening.
No, thank you very much, Nicola. I can see that somehow España Puede doesn't necessarily reflect the ambition that, it just proclaimed somehow. And you are so much right when you say that the pandemic has not taught to us, that we really need a change, the change that Lorenzo and Federico were kind of pointing out, and yourself as well. So now we move on to another EU member state, which is France. Benoît Bory with France Relance, right? That's the name of the recovery plan. I was just catching a line from your LinkedIn, Benoît, which I found very interesting. You were writing, il ne peut pas y avoir des solutions à la fin du monde sans résoudre la question sociale. So we need to be tackling the social aspect in order to be able to change the world, right? So this is what my question to you is talking about France Relance. Do you think that France has the tools and the infrastructures to deal with the pandemic and to come out, to get out of the crisis? Also, is there any real sustainable solution within the plan? And does it get out of the old capitalistic, logic? Is only kind of painted in green? Benoît, the floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Stefania. First of all, I would like to thank the M25 for this invitation and most of you for the organization of this event. Just to say that I'm very happy to be here among you today. Regarding France, the COVID crisis has proved that we were not ready to face it. Until 2010, France had a stock of sanitary masks in order to face a pandemic. For budget reasons, it has been decided that these stocks were no longer useful and have not been renewed. In the meantime, as you probably know, French big pharma champion, Sanofi, has made redundant a big part of its R&D staff in order to maximize its stock price, and this has prevented this company not to provide proper vaccine against COVID. This is why we are now listening from our government a new little tune about the need of planification. In 2020, sanitary crisis cost 86 billion euros in terms of economic helps to various sectors, and it is expected that it will cost in total 200 billion euros at the end of it. What is totally new is that instead of saying we must reimburse this new debt, our government plans to spend another 100 to 250 billion euros in the next 2-3 years to relaunch the economy and investment by financing companies, sustaining research and digital innovation. In the meantime, European Union has announced the European Green Deal to make our economies carbon-free. To give an idea, this is a total of 1,000 billion euros over 10 years. I don't know what is the share for France, but if I take the normal share, this will represent 135 billion euros. And over 10 years, this is just 13.5 billion each year, which remains small compared to the amounts projected domestically in the coming 2-3 years. In this GD, is this GD the same old capitalist logic painting grid? Well, before answering this question, I think that we should understand the why of this GD. And I do believe that the answer lies in global geopolitics regarding the position of Europe concerning energy. We are in a very poor position compared with USA, Russia, China, Australia, and India, which is to say that we have no natural resources except coal in Poland and lignite in Germany. And from this standpoint, Europe has to develop an international policy in which it says, we move first to neutral carbon economy, do you follow us? But is this turn towards a neutral carbon economy real or fake? I think this is a very good question. I will take the example on France in order to answer this question, but I am sure that you will find something very similar in your own countries. In 2019, a citizen convention on climate change has been established with 150 individuals, not elected, but drawn out. This convention has produced proposals to prevent climate change with a target to decrease emissions by 30% in 2030. These proposals are supposed to be turned into a law. Interesting fact, this convention has quoted the government with a note of 3.3 out of 10 to measure how it has turned the proposal of this convention into a law. Many proposals are missing. How could we understand the difference between the green display of a government and the reality? Again, I think the answer is very common to all of our countries. Our GDP is energy-based. And when we talk about energy, in France, this means this energy comes out of 70% of fossil-based, 17% in nuclear, which is something a little bit different from others, 9% biomass, 2% hydraulic, and 2% in new renewable, I mean solar and wind. How could we decrease emissions by 30% in 2030? Assuming that the share of nuclears will remain constant in the energy mix. I know that this is planned to reduce it, but I do not believe that this will happen. This means that at energy efficiency and GDP constant, we have to make a shift of 21% of our energy from fossils to new renewables in 10 years. This means 2.1% of shift each year. We had 2% in new renewables so far. This means that every year we will install the same amount of solar panels and the same amount of wind turbines that we have already on board. To say it directly, frankly, I think this is simply a joke.
Yeah.
Therefore, we all face a dilemma with employment. There are now decades that we have massive unemployment in our countries. And when this is not unemployment, this is poverty among workers. And for decades, growth had been the solution proposed for this major problem. We had growth in the past, it has not solved it. The growth is now low, and our government continue to claim growth as a solution. And this is why we have these investment plans at national and European level. The EGD is specifically based on this. There will be growth, but this will be a green growth. And don't worry, in the same time, we will save the climate. I just showed how this is not realistic at the GDP and efficiency, energy efficiency concerns. We can expect some energy efficiency gains, which will allow some growth, but this will not answer the challenge of climate change. The only way to answer this challenge is to have a conscious degrowth of our economies. Degrowth will be the result of political decision we will make to deter polluting production. But this could only happen if the question of unemployment is solved. A worker can accept to lose his job, but if and only if she has a lot of job proposal in front of him or her. I do believe that unemployment is not a question of activity. It is a question of income. Everybody can have an activity, but this activity does not provide, if this activity does not provide the minimum wage level, there is then no reason to work. Therefore, I think that the only solution to obtain the full employment is to mutualize added value of all production units, all enterprise, all companies, to provide each worker the minimum wage level. This is a solution that we will solve the employment problem within a few months, I do believe. I invite you to have a look at my website, plenemploi.org, which details this solution. Unfortunately, this is in French, but I would be very pleased to share it with the DiEM25. Many surveys show that there is a disconnection between GDP and happiness since the 70s. Degrowth means working less and enjoying free time. I do believe that we have a new society to invent, a society with no excluded person, a society of happiness. As I told it at the beginning, Europe does not have a lot of options regarding natural resources for energy. This is why it has a mission to propose another future to the world, and this future is absolutely not what European Commission and member states have in mind at this time. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. It's so much true what you're saying, and I was in fact reading a comment from a journalist who was calling the recovery the France Relance, so he was calling it the Macronomics, talking about Macron, right? So which is not necessarily going towards the happiness, turning point that you were just coming up with. That's true. We should be considering the well-being of people first of all, right? And that's something that also that the former president of Uruguay, Ben Mujica, is pointing out so much. So the next speaker is, cherry on the cake, I would say, Germany. It's called Wiederaufbaufond, right? The recovery plan of Germany. And Dominika Bigon from the German Trade Union Confederation. So can you please give us an assessment about the German recovery plan from the trade union point of view, and in particular concerning the green transformative part of it?
Yeah, thank you, Stefania, for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you the German trade union perspective on the German recovery plan. So first of all, what do I mean when I talk about the German recovery plan? Here I mean exactly two issues, because first, Germany has already quite early decided on an economic stimulus program worth 130 billion already in June 2020. And besides, in January 21, the German government produced the first draft of the so-called Recovery and Resilience Plan to access the money coming from the new EU Recovery Fund. And if I talk about the German recovery plan, then I mean these two issues. So how do trade unions assess the German recovery plan? So on a very general basis, the German trade unions were quite satisfied actually with the recovery program initiated by the government. In particular, the early intervention by the government and the amount of money mobilized were quite surprising for many. Also, the fact that the German government was willing to finance the recovery by taking on new debt and scrapping their beloved balanced budget rule was surprising for many. So the German recovery plan also has a reasonably well-developed green dimension. I just want to mention, for instance, the support for hydrogen projects, the lowering of the renewable energy surcharge, the purchase premium for electric cars, and so on. However, our main criticism is that the German recovery plan is not enough to prepare the German economy for a carbon neutral future. And this is something that Lorenzo and Federico have also already underlined. In particular, if you look at the public investment side. And in this point, we even have a common understanding with the German employers. In 2019, we, together with the Confederation of German Industry, have made a proposal for an investment plan based on a detailed analysis of the investment needs and also taking into account the investment needs related to the just transition. And here we then estimated that an additional impulse of public investment is needed of 45 billion per year for the next 10 years. And the public investments foreseen in the recovery plan are not enough. And our demand is that the recovery plan should be complemented by a longer-term investment program specifically geared to achieve the national and international climate goals. So, and here we also criticize the German government because they are not willing to take the EU money coming from the Recovery and Resilience Facility to invest in new projects. They only take the money and mainly use it to refinance projects already decided on last year in the context of the economic stimulus program. In our view, the EU money should be used to finance such a longer-term investment program. What is more, the second point is that what is rather weak in the German recovery plan is the perspective of the employees and the workers in the socio-ecological transition. We need to make sure that the socio-ecological transition guarantees decent jobs and that the employees are taking on board. So in this context, for instance, we demand that public investments in education and qualification need to be massively increased. In order to make workers fit for the digital and the green future, yeah? They need to learn new skills, they have to be prepared for new jobs, and so on. And to prevent that many workers are put off in the course of the structural transitions that Germany will face, massively more funding is needed. And here the German recovery plan is completely blank on this issue, yeah? There is no item on how the workforce is going to be made fit for the transition. Strengthening a workers' perspective in the green transition also means for the trade unions strengthening collective bargaining, which is in Germany on a constant decline since the 1990s. We demand, for instance, that public procurement law is reformed so that only companies are awarded a state contract that comply with collective agreements. And in this way, the green transition and decent jobs could go hand in hand. Okay, but I want to mention two further points that have not been mentioned so far. First, the recovery plans are not only about investments. They are also about reforms, about structural reforms, yeah? At least to get the money from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the new recovery from the EU, member states have to show how they comply with the reform recommendations made by the European institutions in the context of the European semester. We German trade unions, we were explicitly opposing this close link between the recovery fund and the structural reform proposals made in the European semester. Yeah, we think that it is not necessary, and we also have a critical attitude towards the European semester because we don't like the structural reforms recommended there, and we also think it's a basically technocratic process. However, now the regulation foresees a close link between reforms and the recovery plans. And now we trade unions demand that it is now important that the focus is put on the right kind of reforms, and that transformative aspects of the recovery plans are not undermined by the wrong kind of structural reforms. And here, then, a close link between the Recovery Fund and the European Pillar of Social Rights is crucially important, so that we get the member states to implement the right kinds of reforms and not the reforms we knew from the last decade. Another point that was already mentioned by how was your name? Nicola?
Yeah, Nicola.
Yeah, Nicola. Is the point stakeholder involvement, because to really have a transformative impact, stakeholder consultation in the drafting and implementation of the recovery plan really has to be improved. And I can only say the same what Nicola said for Spain. And in Germany in particular, those stakeholders from the social economy were completely not involved. And this is really a mess, because usually trade unions and other stakeholders have a strong voice in EU investment policy, at least in Germany, The bulk of EU investment policy is managed via the European structural and investment funds. And in the last decades, we and other stakeholders have managed to implement a consultation process that gives us a strong voice. The key word here is the partnership principle. Because of the partnership principle, we have a say on the priorities of the structural funds. We have a say even on the management of the fund. But all this is not the case in the recovery fund, and this is something we are massively criticizing. So. To conclude my intervention, I think that to assess the transformative character of the recovery plans, we have to take a broader picture. We do not only have to look at what kind of investments are financed, are they green or not? We also have to look what kind of structural reforms are promoted in the context of the recovery fund, and the recovery plans, and also how is the governance of the fund? Are all relevant stakeholders included in the management of the fund? I think this is also decisive to make the Green Deal a success, because a technocratic top-down process promoting structural reforms from the last decade, will surely fail.
Thank you, Dominika. Thank you a lot. So from your point of view, from the trade union point of view, you would say that there are positive aspects and then other aspects might be improved. And then I will just pass on to the next speaker and guest, who is Felix Heilmann from E3G. And if I can be a little bit more provocative, Felix, because I know that you are based in Berlin, in fact, and I was reading recently a very interesting article that was on the Tagesspiel background, that you were just, pointing out very interesting points about the fact that the government simply relabeled already existing projects that, and is not releasing any new funds to supplement green recovery efforts. So my question is, do you think that how can the German recovery plan be improved? And do you think that Germany will be able to be sharing its industrial know-how and technologies with the other European states? And will the German recovery plan take into consideration the diversity of the dynamics of the other European countries? That will be a kind of common ground, that will come up with? Felix, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefania. It's a challenging spot to be speaking after all these very thoughtful and really thought-provoking interventions on all the other speakers. Really a great honor and opportunity to be here today. I think on your first question on how to improve and how we assess the German say, so maybe just very briefly to explain where I'm coming from. So as you say, I'm based in Berlin, and at the moment I'm working a lot on a EU-wide project, which is called the Green Recovery Tracker, in which we, together with national partners to 20 EU member states, look at the draft recovery plans and recovery measures that are being prepared, and we're trying to assess to what extent they're being aligned with the green transition. The official launch is next week, Wednesday, so I can't share any data yet, but maybe I'll add in some sort of high-level observations that I can share already in my intervention. But aside of your question, how to improve the German plan, I would very much share what Dominika just said, and I think from a climate point of view, a lot of the observations, from a observation we can also share. So I think one, the plan itself, the recovery plan for the EU in particular, has been very transparent, and something we've seen in many other member states as well. I think there's a big issue there in the fact that most of the funds, I've been told by the ministry, 80% of the EU funds being to finance previously agreed measures to unlock additional ambition. And if we look at the which in the first EU state to present 150 billion package, and comparing that to the needs of the country, I think it really depends on what we compare it with. I think if we look at a status quo where we're all into fossil fuels, we could say, okay, this is really a really positive package. This is the way the government is framing it. It's investing in hydrogen. We are quite excited about it, going to making renewable energy more affordable and many other things. But I think if we look what's really necessary in terms of public investments for green transition, and for just green transition, the various studies that have put out, really, everyone basically agreeing, all economists, political need to build back better recovery. The plan falls a bit short of that. So we, in our analysis, we come up with it. Yeah.
If I interrupt you, it's broken when you speak. Can you maybe turn off the camera? Maybe that will be smoother. Can we give a try? Because it's it's kind of broken. Yeah, please.
Is it better now?
Try.
Okay, sorry about that. Maybe you should invest in digital infrastructure in Germany. Hello. Can you hear me?
Well, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, essentially, if we look at the numbers, we come up with a 22% share of green spending in the German plan, which isn't great. I mean, yes, it's better than nothing, but it's really quite far from where we have to go. So I think ways to improve the German plan, there aren't that many options left. I mean, the domestic package, we still have the draft recovery plan that is being revised right now, and we would like to see emphasis on additional measures. We think there is quite a lot of potential for additional measures. For example, on energy efficiency, for example, this is a measure that can really create job ground, but also help with the achievement of climate targets, but various other measures as well. So we will see some investments. But I think the really big and the really exciting process right now, and Stefanie picked it up in your question, is European collaboration and the European-wide process around the recovery facility, around Next Generation EU. And I think, well, compared to the status quo previously, Germany has played a constructive role together with France in actually making that, following a long and problematic blockade. But there we've seen a really positive change, I think, with in last summer again, Merkel and Macron making that possible finally to have these joint debts in this big common European plan. And I think now many of you will know this, ahead of 30th of April, all member states have to prepare their recovery plans. We've heard some really good insights. I think it's also interesting. We don't have anyone here today from an Eastern European country where these plans will be quite a large share of their GDP. So it's also quite interesting to see what's happening in those countries. And I think what our says is, I mean, first of all, in all the countries you're seeing, basically, exceptions, the development of the plans has been a really problematic process with very little transparency, with very little opportunities for public participation. And this is true across Europe, as we've heard. So I think that is still a concern. But moving forward, because now that initial development just really comes to its end, or has already finished, I think we're seeing that plans doing good green measures again. So this is like this. I think the slightly nuanced narrative I want to share with you today is that we do see plans actually going into, for example, efficiency, into the decarbonizing industry in Portugal, for example, into various other measures that can into the offshore wind industry in Poland. So it's really some positive measures where the RRF funds can help make some changes. But again, are these measures enough? No, they're not. And I think if we expect the recovery facility to recovery and resilience facility, I should say, I thought that was a really good point, to fix these problems for us, I think we'll be really disappointed. And I think it's a dual challenge of making sure that the plans we're finalized right now are as good as possible, and the window for that isn't over. I think we need to keep challenging governments to be more transparent about that, but also on 30th of April, these plans will then be submitted to the committee. The plans, at least based on our analysis, it's far from certain that all the plans will actually immediately meet the criteria legally part of the RRF regulation on 37% green spending on doing no significant harm. The European Parliament can scrutinize those, even though it doesn't have a role. The Council also has to agree. So the window really isn't over yet. And I think we shouldn't think that the green recovery debate is over. I think it's beginning. And the first big opportunity we have coming up is really looking at those plans and looking, okay, where changes are possibly necessary and possible, and then also in the implementation of the plans. I mean, one thing I can share from our analysis already is we have a lot of money that we assess as likely climate effect, but we assess the direction yet. So this essentially means this is a measure that could be really positive. You know, it could be a building renovation measure, for example, investments in new buildings, where we could say if these are really energy efficient buildings, this could be really good from a climate point of view. It could be good from a point of view if it enables affordable housing in line with environmental requirements, etc. Buildings that are not high quality, that are not very energy efficient, this could also be really harmful. And that's just one example out of many where we see that the devil really is in the detail with those recovery plans, and we shouldn't drop the ball on that, but we really have to keep following that process. And again, I think it's been said already before, the reforms have an important role to play there as well, both within delivering the RRF. So we've seen in the past that a lot of EU member states are willing to actually absorb EU funds, often with the rate being only at about half the funds that are available from the EU really being spent within the country. So following that process, and tedious job to do, but following that process and making sure that this money can actually be spent on the green transition and can actually be spent in a way that is effective, and that we get the green part of the plans to be spent and implemented on the ground, that's going to be really critical. And it's also going to be really critical to just really tackle the wider changes. And I think that's the last thing I want to end on. Again, if we expect the RF to do all these changes for us, I think we'd be disappointed. But I think we shouldn't do that. I think we have to look at the wider framework, whether we like the European Green Deal or whether we don't like it. And I think some legitimate criticisms have been voiced, but I think also it's a really good opportunity and a really good hook to say, you know, everyone now is talking about the climate. And I think Lorenzo was right to say this. I think it's also an opportunity, because to really make progress on climate action, I think we need actors from the economy, from society, to really jointly work towards the achievement of these goals. So I think if we've managed to think big, if we manage to say we have some good green projects in the national plans, we hopefully manage to kick out the bad ones. And then we can say this is the to really go into other policies, to have more ambitious climate targets, to have more ambitious, aggressive policies to support renewables, to help with a timely and just coal phase out, and all the different challenges we're facing. I think that's a real opportunity. So I think that the work isn't over yet. The green recovery debate isn't over yet. And I think we really, in a frustrating way potentially, but we're really just getting started. And I think some of the greatest challenges still lie ahead. And obviously, I invite everyone really warmly to join us next week, Wednesday at 2 p.m. We will present some more hard data, and then we'll keep following this process, because I think there's still a lot to play for. And I'll try and turn my camera on again, but I'll turn it off.
Thank you so much, Felix. We will be there definitely on Wednesday, listening and attending. That will be so interesting from our side. And you're right. It's just an opportunity. It's just a beginning, as you were saying, and we just have to pull up, the forces together and keeping on challenging the governments and keeping on involving people from all different actors of the society. So I have to say thank you, like a huge thank you to the guests and panelists, because they've been so time conscious and mindful. They've been really back to the point. So we have space and room for some questions, which is very much very appreciated. So we have a question from Olivier Blanc. He's asking, is growth still possible within the natural limits of Earth system? We have a number of economists here, so who wants to pick it up? Please raise your finger. Benoît, s'il vous plaît, à vous.
Unmute my mic. Yes, I just unmute my mic. No, I think this is a very good question. I would say theoretically, yes, this is possible to have an unlimited growth. Having said that, we have to be very conscious that what we have with this growth, the growth is energy linked. That means I remember somebody saying, okay, globally, a French has the equivalent in terms of strength of 500 slaves today, which is working for him every day, pulling his car, running in order to produce, running bicycle in order to produce electricity and so on. And this has been possible mainly because of fossil fuels at this time. It appears now that all these resources are going, we have already reached the peak oil from Standard Oil. This is done. Now we have the shale oil, which means that this peak oil will happen within the next 5 years, something like this. We have to understand that oil is probably the most easy energy, because this is easy to put in a tank, to run a machine and so on. This is totally different than carbon, for example. Carbon is domestic based in terms of use. This is not the case with oil, but we are at the end of oil, and we know that this will be exactly the same with the gas within the next 30, 40 years, something like this. And in the same time, we are polluting the atmosphere with the climate claim and so on. So this is the framework in which we are. So question is that any energy that we can find today has a problem. And this is something we say. We know that, for example, I see on the grand thermodynamics laws say, no, that's absolutely the case. Having said that, we have to detail everything. So nuclear at this time is no CO2 emissive. Okay, that's a point. That's a good thing. Having said that, we know that nuclear has a very big problem. We know that with fossil fuels, we will be all dead within 100 years, I would say. With nuclear, this is maybe. This is accidental. This is frightening. And for renewable, this is exactly the same thing. From an hydraulic capacity, we have reached the point everywhere on the planet so far. In France, for example, there is no other possibility to have other dam to produce electricity. This is no longer possible. So the only thing which exists is wind and solar. And there is a conflict of use with the land. Do we want to convert the land which enable us to have food into energy plants? This is a problem. Do we want to have windmills everywhere on our landscape? This is another problem. So this is why, frankly, I do not believe that an unlimited growth is possible at this point, and we can see all the framework of it. Having said that, we have to understand that all people on this planet need to have more or less the same level, life level so far. And this is a global picture in this framework, which let me think that we will have to degrowth in the next year. And if we do not eat politically, if we do not decide it politically, the fact is that we will have to do it within maybe 40, 50 years, and this will be in a terrible frame, in the sense that the climate has changed, in the sense that there will be huge move of population worldwide and so on. So, and I'm not sure we will be able to react within 30, 40 years.
Thank you so much, Benoit. So the way forward and the key point is the growth somehow, right?
Yeah, and that's what I think.
Yeah, there are a number of questions that we can go through. I would just pick, a couple of them. Maybe turning to the Italian guest, because there is a specific question on McKinsey. So either Federico or Lorenzo can pick it up. It's what's the role of McKinsey, and who decides which projects are going to be funded? Federico, do you want to answer this question?
The role, yes, Stefania, thank you. The role of McKinsey is actually not very clear for some reasons. The first reason is the official fee, and we must believe that the official fee is the real fee. So we cannot doubt that what we read from the newspaper is true, and the fee is absolutely low, is nothing, 25,000 euro, so less than an intern at McKinsey. So this is kind of strange, because if you want McKinsey for doing a proper job, you have to pay McKinsey properly, because McKinsey is not working for nothing. So this is the first strange thing in my view. The political choice has been said so far that will be by the government. So the government will decide what project to fund. So my guess was that probably McKinsey would do some, let me call it, dirty job, in the sense that some difficult decision will be proposed by McKinsey. Let me give you an example. We have two companies that are not in good shapes, Ilva and Alitalia. It's just an example. So it might be decided that these companies should fail, should be closed. So this is not an easy decision, because it will create big turmoil and reactions. So maybe the government might say this is a suggestion from McKinsey. So this example is to say that maybe the government wants to use McKinsey for taking some difficult decision. This is an idea. However, if you want McKinsey to do this, you should pay McKinsey properly. So I really don't understand why the government appointed McKinsey and said we are not paying McKinsey a fee, because 25,000 euro is nothing. So it's kind of, in my view, I criticize this decision, and in my view, it is not very rational the way they took the decision, because it seems that McKinsey is there for just giving some suggestion for free, and so I don't understand the rationale of this. The guess is maybe the government wants to use McKinsey for making it easier to make the public opinion accept some difficult decision. This is my guess.
Thank you, Federico. I don't know whether Lorenzo wants to add up to it, you know. There is an info.
Can I just say something very quickly? I've seen a lot of questions. I'm not going to add more to. I think the McKinsey issue is blown out of proportion. I have issues with McKinsey, but I think, you know, consultancies have been there all along. They could have chosen a better consultancy, because McKinsey has a terrible reputation. But, you know, consultants are consultants. But I think there was a question on the issue of growth coming up in the chat, and I think. So to the question, is growth compatible with our planetary boundaries? As a scientist, my answer is, of course, no, unless we change what we mean by growth. I think this is the real challenge, that we should make the whole world realize that our growth model is stupid. Our growth model is inaccurate. Our growth model is anachronistic. And if we change what we mean by growth, and if growth means better quality of life, it means optimizing the use of resources rather than maximizing the use of resources, right? If growth means that we do better rather than we do more, which I think is the meaning of development. Okay, the meaning of development is to do something better. If I can do something with less energy, why should I use more energy if I can do the same with less, right? If I can produce things that I need instead of producing things that I throw away after 10 minutes, I think, you know, I'm more developed than who does the latter. So this is really important. I think the challenge is, that's why I came up with this idea of a well-being economy. Years ago, I said, if we keep on fighting for degrowth per se, we're never going to get out of this, because no one wants to go back. But if we fight for something different, to go forward with a better quality development, with doing better rather than with making better things rather than making more things, then we're going to be able to convince a wider range of people, that's what I think, and perhaps become a majority rather than just a small niche that keeps complaining and never gets enough power to really change the system.
Well, I love it. I mean, it's like not going back, but readdressing the root somehow. And I know that also Nicola wanted to say something about that, right? Can I have you in, Nicola?
I think it's basically now echoing the point which have been raised by Lorenzo. I think from a scientific point, physical limit to growth. And just wanted to add the issue of the non-renewable materials related to the European Green Deal program, but also related to whole the issue on the next generation EU funds on the digitalization and all the shift to renewables. They are not possible without these minerals, cobalt, lithium, and these are minerals. We have to get them somewhere. They are, I think, well, we know that they are not renewable. They are ending, and I think so. We have these limits. Physically, it's not possible to grow endlessly, and especially based on these minerals. And we have all the issue of external responsibility of our recoveries. Because these decisions, the need for these minerals will basically impact on territories in the global south, where mining, for example, has always been a really conflictual issues. So just to echo and to say, don't forget the external responsibility of our European recovery strategy in the next years. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, just asking, when we in the chat, basically, we're chatting a bit on the debt issues. I don't know, do you want me to explain what it wrote there? Because maybe if somebody has some other opinion or issue, but in terms of funding the Next Generation EU program, I just thought it was important to point out that the way of funding this package is basically by emitting European debt. Now, this is a historical decision which the European Commission made in 2020 to issue debt, which is mutualized debt, Euro bonds. So we have mutualized debt where we share responsibilities towards the creditors and its bonds being emitted in the next years. So we will indebt ourselves towards private on the financial markets in order to finance this next generation EU. I think it's an important point to think that our next generations, the new European children who now have 5 years, will be paying this debt towards those private funders in the next 13, 40 years. So there's a whole issue of financing this public funds.
Thank you a lot, Nicole. And whatever, I mean, we went through a lot of discourses and very interesting points that you have been raising, all of you. A lot of inputs and really food for thought. I would say that is only the beginning. Felix was saying that, he was highlighting the fact that somehow the recovery plans might not be the best ones, but they're just the beginning. And together we can make, the way forward. for a better future. And I would like to thank all the guests and the speakers, the Corporate Euro Observatory, Federico Carli, Lorenzo Fioramonti, Nicola Scherer, Dominica Bigon, Felix Heilmann, and the last word to our coordinator, Dusan Pajovic. Thank you all.
Thank you, dear Stefania. Yes, as I implied in the beginning, I have to stress once more that our Green New Deal, opposing to the European Green Deal, is both green and new, which is crucial. We are workers-friendly solution, and we are really green, not just green in a cosmetic terms. We are offering solutions, and we would like to have you all on board. You can contact me or you can contact Stefania here, and I'm sure we can collaborate more in the future. Basically, we are starting Green New Deal 2.0, so you'll be hearing a lot more from us, I hope. Carpe diem. Thank you all.
So it's about collaboration. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you all. And keep in touch for future.